in the trade world, there's winner, no winner. Please don't just rely on one bank. Companies should actually look for alternative solutions. Try to collect your receivables, the cash faster, and try to pay payables later. Mm-hmm. So the longer you can delay the payment, the more cash that you keep, the better you'll become.
Welcome to today's New Wave Talk Show. Today, we are excited to have Cissy Hon join us as our first guest. Good to see you, Cissy.
Hi, Helena.
First of all, would you please share a little bit about yourself? Tell us more about your background, your experience, and your story.
Sure. Thank you, Helena. I'm Cissy Hon, and my career spans over 2 decades at the intersection of transaction banking and fintech. Primary focus on enabling international trade. My journey began with some roles in transaction banking at institutions like Royal Bank of Scotland, Citi, BNP, where I specialize in trade finance and cash management for MNC and large corporates. In the recent years, I have actually transitioned into the fintech industry. And so my roles at Modify and Stand Technologies are very similar, and we have involved in building global sales teams, innovating product offerings like embedded finance solutions, and forging strategic partnerships with companies such as OOCL, Ping Pong, and also Citi and Ant Financial.
As you have rich experience in the international trade industry, what's your opinion of current China-US trade war tension? And what would your suggestions to China's exporters?
I think the ongoing China-US tension is a complex and evolving situation. It's less of a war, I think, in my opinion, more like a strategic rebalancing and negotiation of trade terms. So with both sides seeking to protect their economic interests and to influence global supply chains. The impact is multifaceted, leading to shifts in sourcing, increased supply chain diversification, and a greater emphasis on regional trade blocks. So my suggestions for China exporters are the following. I think number one, to diversify markets and supply chains. So instead of just relying on US, exporters should go into Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. So that's number one. Number two, I think exporters should focus on high value and niche products. So they've already done very well. I think they should continue to invest in research and development and focus on unique products, specialized products that have good quality. And then number three, I think they're already doing that. Embrace digital transformation and e-commerce. I think Chinese exporters should leverage cross-border e-commerce platforms and use more digital tools to reach out to customers directly and just to reduce reliance on the traditional trade intermediaries like the middleman. Also, I think they need to strengthen domestic consumption just to increase domestic sales. And lastly, I think, and also most importantly, they need to do more in risk management. So the volatility in trade means increased currency fluctuations and liquidity tightening. So exporters need robust financial management strategies, including hedging tools and more diversified financing solutions just to navigate these uncertainties.
These are really great advices for Chinese exporters. And I have a tough one for you. In your opinion, which country will win the trade war?
In my opinion, there's no win or there's no loss in the trade war. I think trade is a bilateral. Supposedly, it should be beneficial to both parties, right? So in the trade war, there's winner, no winner. I think what we are likely to see are a continuation of evolving trade dynamics. I think countries and companies who demonstrate adaptability, innovation, and also diversification will be the most resilient, and ultimately they will be able to survive. So I think, people who really need to embrace new technologies and explore new markets will be the survivor.
I know you have worked with both Chinese seller and international sellers. So in your mind, what's the key differences between Chinese sellers and sellers in other countries? What advantages and disadvantages of Chinese sellers in your mind?
The key difference is Chinese exporters are very speed to market. They are very fast. They can really scale up, and they, once they can adopt something, they will go, full blown. Let's talk about the advantages first. I think Chinese sellers have a lot of distinctive advantages. So number one is the manufacturing, capacity. So they are very efficient. They're also very flexible. So they definitely have the manufacturing power, especially on cost effectiveness, their ability to offer very competitive pricing and very efficient supply chain. And the lower labor costs also play a very pivotal role. And then, like I mentioned earlier, they speak to the market and they have very strong digital adoption. It's fascinating to see Chinese exporters using, different platforms, and they have very innovative supply chain systems. So these are all the advantages from my perspective. In terms of disadvantages, I think there are also some very, obvious ones. So number one, I think brand perception, brand building, right? So Chinese sellers still face challenges in building global brands. So they have to overcome the perceptions that they are, cheap labor and cheap quality, which is not. And then secondary, I would think that the regulatory and compliance complexity, they need to navigate. So international regulations are very complex and they have very high standards. So especially the banks will strictly ensure all the trade policies that are being adopted. So that is something that I think Chinese exporters are left behind. And then thirdly is their reliance on the exporters market. So you can see that why there's a trade war is because, they rely heavily to sell to the US and European market. So I think to diversify the markets is also very key. And then like myself, right? So there's also language and culture barriers. So Chinese exporters need to make sure that they understand the culture and also the language of different markets, not only English, but also other different languages, so that when they have negotiations and do marketing and especially customer service, then they will be able to provide, better user experiences. Lastly, I think which is also most importantly, is the access to international finance. Domestic finance is robust. I think accessing to certain types of international trade finance, especially for the SMEs, the small, medium-sized customers, that is very important. So sometimes they might not be able to understand all the trade corridors, and especially in very complex situations, then they may lag behind. So these are the disadvantages.
I think it requires a lot of efforts from the Chinese sellers, but we can also see the huge potential here. And Cissy, I'm sure our audience are all impressed by your rich finance background. So would you share your opinion, what kind of the role of finance plays for export company? If you are asked to give Chinese sellers some suggestions, like 5 do's, 5 don'ts, what would you say?
Okay, so first of all, I think because of my formal banking experience as a banker, so I deal with a lot of finance professionals. I think finance is a very important department within an organization because they manage risk. They also enables operations. They promote growth. So it's not just about numbers and money, but they do a lot of different things. So finance is, hugely important in any corporations. I can give some of my suggestions and observations. So for the do's and don'ts, okay, let me think about it. For the do's, I think number one, do diversify the funding sources. So I'm going to upset some banks, but I would say that please don't just rely on one bank. companies should actually look for alternative solutions, fintech companies, supply chain finance platforms, alternative lenders, because cash is king. So the more of the excess of the cash, the better you'll be. Also, do manage your FX risk, because hedging strategies can protect your profit margin, especially during currency fluctuations. So even small movements can eat in the profit margin. So I think FX is very important. So we need to manage that risk. Do optimize the working capital cycle. When I say working capital cycle, is try to collect your receivables, the cash faster, and try to pay payables later. Mm-hmm. So the longer you can delay the payment, the more cash that you keep, the better you'll become. Also, do embrace digital finance solutions. We talk about it repeatedly, but I think that's very important, because online platforms for payments, for invoicing, for trade finance applications, all these are going to reduce a lot of costs and prevent a lot of errors, and it's also very important. So then lastly, I think be a good citizen. What I mean is you do understand and leverage government support and the use of export credit agency, especially in China. I think China is a very policy-driven country, and the government always have very good support. They research and they utilize many different, incentive schemes from the government. And then on top, also export credit insurance. These are the financing programs that are designed to support exporters. So I think these are all the do's that exporters should adopt. In terms of the don'ts, again, I think going back to compliance, don't underestimate the compliance costs. Oftentimes we hear a lot of jargons, such as AML sanctions, right? So anti-money laundering policy, US sanctions. All these are very important regulations, and we must we do not underestimate all these laws and also the regulations, and we do not neglect due diligence on buyers. So do understand your buyers very thoroughly. Study their financials, understand their history, whether they have late payments or whether they're credible or not, and don't over rely on a single currency. So in constructing contracts, if possible, instead of just using one US dollar contract, maybe explore renminbi or other currencies that are freely negotiable and freely convertible, that will protect your margin and your own costs as well. And don't ignore the power of data in finance. So the more the data, the better control you have, the more transparency, and therefore the better success rates that you'll get. And ultimately, I think don't afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to seek expert help. So engage with financial advisors. Follow your channel, Helena. I think your channel has a lot of good information. And then, structure more solutions. So these are my suggestions.
You also mentioned like the data and also the fintech. The finance industry is evolving very fast nowadays. Now we have the stable coins, all the new things appear in this industry. So have you seen any major trends we should pay attention to, especially for the for the exporters, international traders?
Yeah, I think we have already talked about embedded finance, right? So this is one of the trends that I've been constantly seeing. I have worked with companies, logistics providers, where at their shipment tracking system, there's a page where you can actually click to apply for finance. So that's what we call embedded solutions. And then e-commerce platforms, right? They're supposed just to buy and sell goods, but you also see that at their point of sale system, there's also buy now, pay later solutions. So these are all embedded finance solutions. And then secondly, when, many years ago, when I was, graduated from university, when we worked in the trade finance department, we use all paper-based documents, letters of credit, DP, DA, right? Everything is documents. But right now, it's all paperless. Everything is on blockchain, digitalized, automated. So this is also a very important trend, because you will try to pull more data in a more, transferable and interoperability type of format. And then there's also the buzzword, obviously, people are talking about AI and machine learning. So I think in way documents processing, we see a lot of the usage already. Not a lot in finance at the moment. I think only in risk management decisions. But in terms of processing, there's always a lot of machine learning. So people can train up the system to actually compare documents and pick up the discrepancies. And then in terms of risk management, in the old days, we have to compile ratios. We have to look at all the financials ourselves, where now you can just upload and then everything will be analyzed. Right? And then the other buzzword or the other trend would be ESG. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So increasingly, companies are being asked to look at all these factors, ESG. Sometimes financing and also contracts can only be one if you have all these three elements. So this is another increasing trend, which is up and coming, or is already here, but more and more important. And then I think we also just mentioned, and I'm just going to summarize, I think the most important thing will be the use of alternative lenders and non-bank finance. So in the old days, we only rely on banks, but nowadays you can actually go to a lot of different platforms. These are called supply chain solutions or alternative, lenders. They will provide not only, third-party lending, also sometimes peer-to-peer lending, so B2B, but also B2B to C or P2P. So there are many different forms, and there are many different types of solutions. So I think, again, just to summarize, I think data efficiency, transparency, all these are the important trends.
Or any other things you would like to share with us?
I just want to thank for, the opportunity to have this insightful discussion. Just being someone who has worked in the industry for 2 decades, from the bottom of my heart, I just hope that ultimately more industry players will offer true transparency, true credit liquidity, and true support to SMEs to have access to data and liquidity. I think right now SMEs are underserved and they are not being, they sometimes cannot get the kind of support that they want from the typical banks. I just hope that people are just talking about it, but they are truly helping the SMEs. And then we can see more exporters going abroad. Yeah, so that's my hope as well.
Thank you for your time, Cissy. Great chatting with you today, and I'm sure we will get back to you again later. Thank you.
Thank you.